Hello, sister travelers. Well, today I have a returning guest on the show. Um, Back in March on episode 78, I had a Julie Fenn on the show who shares her story of how she retired early and is traveling the world, which she is currently still doing. But I was able to catch up with her again during her travels recently as she was sort of finishing up her time in Australia. And the reason I wanted to catch up with her, not only to find out, what she's been up to these last few months since I've interviewed her in March, but to highlight an area that back in January, episode 66, I talk about 12 popular places that people are traveling to in 2024 that are also safe for solo travelers. And one of those places is Queensland, the state of Queensland in Australia. Now, if you're not familiar with the land down under, as we Americans call it, and everyone else probably, is Australia is rather large and it's comprised of states similar to USA. We have states, but these states are larger areas. But there's 6 states and 2 territories. And one of them is Queensland, which is in the northeast corner, kind of along that coastline, are some of those popular cities that we'll be talking about. In the capital, there is Brisbane. And so I got a chance to catch up with Julie and to hear all about some great recommendations about Queensland. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. And if you want to hear again about Julie's travels and hear her story, go back to episode 78 and you can hear all about that. And even if you want to catch up with her, you can watch her on Instagram and I'll give you that information at the end. All right. So enjoy today's episode as we highlight an area of Queensland. Welcome to Solo Travel Adventures for women 50 and older. I'm Cheryl Esch, your host, solo travel advocate, freedom traveler, and coach. This is your passport to adventure. Julie, it is so fun to have you back again. So I had Julie on episode 78, and she shared her whole story of how she retired early and has been traveling ever since, basically. But I brought her back on because we are looking to highlight some of those places that I mentioned in the beginning of the year that are really good places, popular places for solo travelers to travel in 2024. And Queensland, Australia, is one of them, which Julie has been to a few times in the past year. So, Julie, welcome back. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's really great to be back. And I've been really enjoying the podcast since our last talk. I'm catching up with all the past episodes. And yes, I am back in Australia. I arrived here back in December and traveled basically south to the north from Melbourne to Cairns, and in that covering Queensland. And that was in the summer months. Now, of course, this is the southern hemisphere, so that it's something I wasn't quite used to, the heat. And now that I'm here in their autumn, it's more the fall, like it's the cooler temperature. So I had to kind of get ready for outfitting my wardrobe for that.
Right.
And presently I'm in New South Wales and I finish up in Australia in 2 weeks. So
Okay.
I did spend, I would say in total, probably 4 months in Queensland. It was by far my favorite state. It was quite diverse in landscape and activities and culture and people. And I really, really enjoyed Queensland.
So my big question is, when people think of Australia, they think of Sydney. They might even think of Brisbane. Mostly Sydney, of course, is the big hub, right? Lots of people, when they get there that have never been, that's where they want to go. But why do you think the shift is happening where people are not going to Sydney so much anymore and they're wanting to explore, like you said, Queensland, where you've spent 4 months? What's the difference between the two? You've been to both, so why do you think there's a shift?
I think for me, New South Wales is quite beautiful. Sydney, of course, I didn't know a lot about, getting into the nitty gritties in these states. I just wanted to go Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Cairns. I mean, that's basically, and I did go to Perth as well. So you kind of do the main cities, but of course, Sydney was very nice, and I'm not knocking it at all. It's a big city, as
Yeah.
Brisbane is. I think it's 2.5 million in Brisbane. It's an international airport. It's smaller than Sydney, but it has great access to the hinterland, which is like the interior with the mountains. They're not like
Mm.
huge Rocky Mountains, but they're nice hiking and waterfalls. You have the rainforest in Queensland, so you have that diversity of the landscape, and of course the beaches. The Great Barrier Reef starts in Queensland, and the Great Barrier Reef itself, I think, is like 1,500 miles long. So we
Mm.
think of Great Barrier Reef, we think of the north. Like, I didn't really know it was stretched that far. So the beaches are much different in Queensland than they are in New South Wales. There's also different creatures in the water as well, as the sharks are mostly in the south. In the north, there's the jellyfish, crocodiles, but the beautiful coral along the reef. So I did some diving up in Cairns, and that was one of my bucket list things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was the diversity of activities to do in Queensland seemed to be more attractive to me. And the people were like a little bit more laid back. Not
Mm.
that they were stuck up in New South Wales, but it was just a different culture, more mining. FIFO workers that fly in, fly out. So a lot of them go into the interior, do their mining, and then they come out to the coast and live, because it's
Oh.
getting more expensive to buy properties. Brisbane, I think the properties, real estate is up 16%, which is a big boom. Gold Coast is a metropolis it reminds me of like Miami, with all the high rises,
Mm.
hotels and resorts. The beach is 70 miles long. It's beautiful beach. It wasn't really my vibe. I did go
Mm.
visit Surfers Paradise. I could have spent more time there, but this time of year it wasn't really beachy to go. And there's a lot of attractions in Gold Coast, like not like Disney themed. I think there's a Universal there,
Oh,
SeaWorld, and
okay.
those kind of. So it's really family orientated, if you're looking for that as well, which I wasn't.
Yeah.
So
Not as a
I
solo traveler, right?
no,
Yeah.
I like to I found a lot of little beach towns on my north migration from Brisbane to Cairns. I just got the Greyhound bus pass, because transportation in Queensland, as well as New South Wales, Australia as a whole, is very, very good and pretty affordable, even if you're flying. So, but I wanted to get into the little towns, beach
Yeah.
towns, and I took the bus. The bus takes you pretty much everywhere I wanted to go, and pretty affordable too.
No, I'm glad you talked a little bit about transportation because, when you go to a new country, that's kind of a concern, especially as a solo traveler, but just really any traveler, being able to get around maybe without having to rent a car, and so that's nice to hear that
Yeah,
Queensland had a great infrastructure with public transportation, it sounds like. So,
yeah, and there was a big culture here is renting camper vans, which for me as a solo traveler, I wasn't going to rent a camper van for my whole time in Australia. I would have loved to, but it would have been very expensive. So I did look at renting a camper van in in Queensland in my first time back in January, through an app called Camplify, where you actually rent somebody else's camper
oh,
van.
yeah,
And they have that RV Easy, I think, in North America that I've
yeah,
seen. So
yeah.
it's similar to that. But what happened about 3 days before I was getting the camper van for the week, the camper van went in for maintenance, so they canceled, and I wasn't
Mm.
able to find a more affordable camper van after that. So I quickly changed my plan, because some of the areas you do need a vehicle to get to. The bus transit didn't really get me into
Okay.
the hinterland. When I say hinterland, that's like you're about an hour inland from the beach, and that's where there's beautiful lookouts and mountains and heights and waterfalls.
Oh,
And
okay.
you do need a vehicle for that. So I rented a
Okay.
car in Brisbane, and I would just stay at Airbnbs, and I just did a total blast of all these lookouts, really nice, beautiful, curvy, great motorcycle roads, beautiful scenery. And you're only about an hour from the coast. So you can, some of these lookouts, you can see the ocean from the lookouts, a little cooler because you're higher elevation,
Right.
great hike and waterfall. So I did do that to, to change it
Yeah.
up a bit.
Okay.
And but the other option with the camper vans, they have here, is you can relocate a camper van. And so these companies, because a lot of people just take these vans one way,
One way.
and you
Yeah.
can pick up the camper van and drive it back from the main city centers, like from Cairns to Brisbane, say. And they give you so many days to do it, like 7 days or 6 days, and it costs you peanuts, like I think $1 a day or something like that. I wasn't able to find one of those that was fitting my schedule, but that's a really great way to have a vehicle and camp, because there's lots
Yeah.
of great camping, free camping or cheap camping. You have to do your research on that. So that was another way
Good.
I
Yeah.
would look at to get around, and having a camper van, there's your accommodation and there's your
Right. You could, I mean,
transportation.
your transportation, like you said, your sleeping arrangements and your transportation.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome. And
yeah.
do you remember what was the name of that again? The
That the
camper
one
van?
for the camper van, it was called Co-Seats, CO, then seats. So
Okay.
I can send you these links, because it was I did have one actually for Airlie Beach to Brisbane, but I actually, when I went to pay for it, because I think I had to do $100 deposit to reach, but I ended up clicking, because there's quite a few that will go from these city centers, and I ended up clicking on the wrong city, and I was going to Adelaide, which is too far away from where I wanted to be.
Where-
So I ended up missing out on that. So
Okay.
you have to be able to drive. Some of them are manual transmissions.
Mm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think most of them are automatic. So, and you are, of course, driving on the left-hand side of the road, on the right-hand side of the vehicle. So you have to be comfortable with
Yeah.
that, which
Yeah.
is, to
I
me,
was going to ask you that. I think that
yeah,
was what it was. Yeah. Yes.
yeah,
I've
it's
done
a
that.
mental challenge for me. I like to get in the vehicle, and, you don't want to pick it up I didn't want to pick my rental car up at Brisbane Airport, because that to me was quite going to be intimidating. So
Sure.
I rented just a little 3-cylinder Suzuki Swift from an app called Turo, which they do have that in North America.
Yeah.
Same thing. People rent out their cars.
Yeah.
So that was what I used, and I got the car half price, and I rented it. It was
Okay.
good enough for me. So that was another way to get
Another
an
way to get around.
affordability to get around. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea because renting cars is really expensive. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a big chunk if you decide to go that way. But it sounds like if you want to get outside the city and seeing all the stuff that you mentioned, and we'll probably get into some more, like you do need a vehicle to get out to those places. And
Yeah, along the beaches, it's fine.
hmm
There's trains and there's buses, the Greyhound buses. Actually, there's a couple bus lines like Greyhound. Um, and they make several stops along the coastline. But if you want to go more interior, see more of
Right.
the outbacks, I didn't get in to see the outback. But just to get into the mountain area, yes, you do need your own vehicle or another transportation.
Yeah. So outside of, you said you did a scuba dive, right? While you were
Yeah.
summer. Yeah. What other activities did you do that happen in Queensland area that you did?
Um, well, the other activity that I did, one of my favorite spots, was Airlie Beach in the Whitsundays. It's a beautiful area. I booked a day boat trip. They took you out snorkeling, and that's part of the Great Barrier Reef. And then we climbed up this to Whitehaven Beach, which is, if you see a lot of pictures of Australia, you'll see that beach. It's this white
Mm,
silicon sand, and it is pristine and just beautiful. So that is one of my favorite spots. Airlie Beach is where it's based out of, and you go into the Whitsundays, and you can
Okay.
there's sailing trips you can do, like a 2-day sail. I just did a 1 day because I'm a budget traveler. I
Mhm.
knew I was spending more money on the liveaboard up in Cairns and scuba diving, so
Mhm.
I was cutting out some of the other activities that were going to cost, because it's Western prices for these excursions. But I would go by the weather if the weather wasn't great. In On the Fraser Island, which is, they call it Kagare. It's white. It's a sand island, and that was
Mm.
another popular spot that people were going to go see. And you can do river tubing, and you can camp out there, and that's where the dingoes are. I chose not to do that one
Okay.
because I also have a budget, and I'm trying to, I want to spend more money on Great Barrier Reef. Is more important to me to spend my extra excursion money on than to
Yeah.
go to a sand island. Whitsundays was no question, is definitely something to see. And of course, the Great Barrier Reef. And you don't have to scuba dive to go see it. You can go out on a day and spend, like, I think my trip was 1,100, but I lived on a boat out on the Great Barrier Reef, and that was because that was what I wanted to do. But you could do a day trip for a
Yeah.
third the cost,
Okay.
basically.
Okay.
And if you just want to see the reef, if you don't dive, no problem. You can snorkel. There's
Mhm.
even glass bottom boats up there. So, and there's lots of different spots along the coast of Queensland that you can go out to see the reef. I chose Cairns because I had researched this liveaboard, but and it's the closest. I think it's the closest city center to the reef itself. The reef is out quite a ways
Mm.
from mainland, so I didn't want to spend 3 hours on a boat to get to the reef.
Yeah. You mentioned that Queensland has some jungle areas or rainforest areas, I think is what you said.
Yeah,
Did you do some hiking in some of the areas?
yeah. Up in Cairns, north
Okay.
of Cairns, towards Port Douglas, there's there was lots of national parks, and in the rainforest, pretty much covered about 500 miles of the rainforest. And I didn't have a vehicle to get to these national parks, so that kind of limited me. But up in Cairns, because it's such a touristy area, I
Mm-hmm.
hopped on the bus, and it took me to, I think it's called Karenga. There's a sky train, like a gondola sky lift that takes you to this little rainforest town. And I did some hiking up it's right kind of in the rainforest. Did some hiking around that town. But a lot of times I couldn't get into the rainforest because they were in national parks, and I didn't have a vehicle to get to it. So
Okay.
I seen the rainforest through this excursion I kind of did. And then I took the scenic railway train back through the rainforest back to Cairns, which was quite nice.
Oh,
They
that's a great
yeah,
idea.
yeah, it was. I think it's called the Karenga Scenic Railway. It's an old railway but updated, um, from the early 1900s, and it's a tourist thing to do. But it's a nice way to kind of go through the rainforest.
Yeah.
It goes fairly slow. You stop at certain spots and see the big waterfalls, the massive waterfalls from the rivers, and yeah. So that was I didn't really do some extreme hiking, but I did those kind of exploring
No.
things.
Okay.
But yeah, that was, and I went to Port Douglas as well. I'm on a hostess. One of the greatest things that I did when I was here in Australia was I used Host Sister,
Mm-hmm.
and I got connected with so many ladies here who are. I'm a Host Sister over 50. There was so many ladies, so many great friendships that I made, and we stayed in contact as I kept traveling. I had spent 3 months, then I went to Indonesia for 2 months, and then I returned
That's right.
to
Yeah.
Cairns. Now I'm doing Cairns back down to like kind of north to south. And I reconnected with some of these ladies. So they actually would pick me up and take me around their, they
That's
knew
so
the same.
nice.
Yeah. We
See?
go for lunch. Sometimes we go swimming in the ocean, and they're curious, they want to know about, and it's not just about travels we talk about, it's just, life in general. Some of these ladies are solo travelers as well. And then you really get to know them on a personal basis when you spend a little bit more time. So that was great. And they would tell me about, there were some cyclones that hit Australia. Queensland does get, for the weather, they do get there's cyclone season, rainy season, which is, it was when I was here in December, they got hit in Cairns, and some of the roads were really destroyed. It was fixed by the time I got up there in February, but you have to watch the weather up in the rainy rainforest. It's rainy and it's beautiful when the waterfalls, but that's where there's storms. So this friend of mine from Cairns, she drove me through, told me that what had happened here with the storms, and washed out the roads, and how it's changed the beaches, how the storms changed the beaches as well.
I bet. Yes.
They get washed out, and then it's rocks. It's not as pristine, or it's not as clear water. I wouldn't have known any of that. I just thought this was normal, but it's not at certain times of the year. So you have to, to me, it's still beautiful. I didn't know what it would look like before. So that was, it was nice to have that local knowledge.
Absolutely. Yes.
With these ladies. Yeah.
I think that's great. And, that's a great resource. You said hostess sister. There's hostess sister, 50 up. And they're all over, like you said, in different regions. So sometimes you make longtime friends doing that. It sounds like you did. But I love the local connection. So it kind of reminds me when I went to Belize, like our Airbnb host actually showed us around, so it's a nice way to also get to know a little deeper knowledge of where you're at. So I love that. Yes.
Yeah. You put a little bit of effort to make these connections.
Yeah.
Keeping track of where everybody is. When I first posted on a hostess sister, I was inundated with tons of people across Australia opening up even their homes. Sometimes you can stay with I just was looking for meetups, and I made a strong effort to reach out to these ladies and stay in touch with them, because I think networking as I solo travel in this lifestyle is very important. Sometimes you can't sleep at night. I think, oh, who's awake? Australia's awake. That kind of thing.
Right. And we talked last time, I think we touched a little bit, I think, on our last conversation about just, that loneliness. So it's a nice way to, feel connected and not like you're all alone out there.
Yeah.
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 Awesome. So outside of some of those touristy places and, the hot spots that you've mentioned that you could go see in Queensland, did you go somewhere that might be a little hidden gem that you want to share?
I would, not so much a hidden gem. Airlie Beach was definitely my favorite place. Noosa area, which is just a bit north of Brisbane. It would be, Airlie is very touristy because of the Whitsundays, and people go there to do that. Noosa is kind of a rugged coast, but great for surfing. So that was a place that I actually did stay for 3 days, and I did do some hiking through the Noosa National Park. So, and that was along the beach line. And I would just sit on a rock and just watch the surfers, because they were, just the way that the waves came in, that you were actually quite close to them on the way the currents went. So, Noosa was actually one of my. It's not hidden, because a lot of people know about Noosa, but I didn't know about Noosa before I came to Australia. So it was just like, what's this Noosa? And really, I didn't know. As I was traveling my Greyhound bus pass going north, I really didn't know where I was going to be stopping. Like, of course, Byron Bay. Byron Bay was a spot that it's made famous because of the famous the surf, and then all the famous people that live there, like celebrities live there. So there's a big draw to that, which I did go there. It's very overpriced, and great music buskering on the streets in Byron Bay. But other than that, it wasn't really appealing to me. But Noosa had this, it was kind of cut up into, like, there was these different areas in Noosa. In between, there was this kind of mountain area. So the city didn't kind of go over the mountain. You had to do a little effort to go to these different parts of Noosa Head, Noosa Junction, Noosa Rivers. I had an Airbnb close to the national park. I could walk to the beach. It was probably about 25-minute walk to the beach. So that's okay. That's where I kind of get my hiking exercise in. And the bus would take me to these other areas in Noosa. Noosa is kind of the general area. And then I rented an e-bike, and
Yeah.
the e-bike company gives you these little trails, because there's great bike paths that you can take. And I actually rode it up to a mountain, to a lookout. So it was great. I had an e-bike for the mountain. And that was a nice little activity that I did outside of Noosa. So there was paddle boarding you can do, and there
Oh,
was lots
wow.
of
Yes.
activities to do in Noosa. And I really enjoyed Noosa. And I don't know if it's really a hidden gem, because people in Australia do go there, but that would be anything in that area.
Okay.
I think that's just north of the Sunshine Coast, or maybe they consider that Sunshine Coast. So that was probably one of my favorite spots. I went there on my drive up. Actually, one of the hostess sisters took me there. I didn't stay there
Okay.
because it is kind pricey to stay in Noosa itself. On my way back down, I wanted to stay in Noosa, and so I rented an Airbnb and just took the bus up, took the train, took the bus, and then from there I could just walk around. And I met up with that lady again, and we became really good friends. She took me to her family ranch,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, she picked me up. We went up for lunch, or went up for dinner a couple times, and then she took me to her family ranch, which was kind of a nice treat too, on a
Yes.
very famous river, Mary River in Queensland. So they
Okay.
told me about history, and her
Yeah.
husband's a farmer there, or rancher, I guess it would be, because they just have cattle. Told me about the because I hadn't seen any spiders or snakes up to that point, and everybody was saying, "Oh, there's dangerous animals that'll kill you." But I come from Canada where there's cougars and bears. So he told me, he had told me about, the different plants that the Aboriginals use. It was actually once an Aboriginal site. Now it's a farm, and the
Okay.
Aboriginals still will come there. So he told me about what he learned from them about the plants, and why things were positioned certain ways along the farm, along the river, the dangerous snakes I should look out for, the spiders, the different animals, or reptiles, I guess that
Yeah.
could
Reptiles.
harm.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I haven't seen a snake yet, and I have seen maybe one of those big ugly spiders, but it was pointed it out to me in a jungle walk I did. But it wasn't like I woke up with a spider on my head. It was not. There hasn't been anything like that here, like some of the stories that people talk about in Australia. I think that might happen more in different regions than where I was staying, but I
Probably
have
more in
have
the
yet,
outback for sure.
probably more out
Yeah.
back here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't seen anything dangerous really at all. Jellyfish, like the other thing to think about is jellyfish season here runs from, I think, October to June, or
Mm.
May, June,
That's
and
a long
so
time.
it is quite a long time. So we had to wear stinger suits when I went into to go snorkeling, and as well as diving. The water was very warm, even when I was diving. You just had to wear a thin stinger suit, and you wear that for the protection of the tank as well. But I think the water, they said to me, was 31 degrees.
That
That
is
Yeah,
really, that's
it was
Celsius, I
very
know, but that's really warm.
Celsius. Yeah, it was
That's
very
like
warm.
maybe 80s. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm trying
yeah,
to like
early
equate. So
80s, low
yeah,
80s. Yeah.
probably
So
80s.
that it was very nice to be in that kind of water, um you know playing and I did jump in the water at other beaches, but the waves sometimes are pretty extreme. So I
Yeah.
a lot of these areas, because of the jellyfish, like Airlie Beach and a lot of the other towns, have like rock pools or man-made lagoons, Cairns as well. So they have these huge areas, beautiful man-made lagoons or rock pools, that you can go there and go swimming. And I mean, up in the north of Queensland, north of, well, Cairns and north, there's crocodiles. Crocodiles kind of come down. There's
Mm.
saltwater crocodiles, and the
Hmm.
freshwater ones are in the river. So you don't really want to be in. You don't see a lot of people swimming at the beaches in Airlie Beach in north,
Okay.
because of the jellyfish and possible crocodiles. So they have these really nice swimming areas where you can do laps.
Oh,
Australians
wow.
are great. great swimmers everywhere you look in schools. They go to swimming schools.
Mm-hmm.
So they have all these lagoons you can swim in to cool down. There's play areas for the young kids, and there's lap pools, and they're really beautifully landscaped. And then they also have stinger nets in a lot of their on their beaches. They'll have these stinger, so that's where you can go in
Okay.
safely. And I went in the water quite a few times with these stinger nets. So that
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't, I
That
mean, I kind of knew about jellyfish, but didn't really think about that's a long season for their jellyfish
yeah.
there.
Well, I think it's because it's so warm. The water is so
Yeah.
warm. And you'll see a lot of times along the beaches, they'll have these stands with jugs of vinegar because vinegar takes out, you pour that on for the jellyfish. So that was something interesting to see.
Yeah.
It would just be like these stands with a sign warning you have jellyfish. I mean, you shouldn't be in the water knowing that anyway. Most people have pools, I think. But if you did get in, I mean, what's the chances? The chances might be really low, but at that one chance, you could get that box jellyfish
I
that
was gonna say
you
there's some dangerous ones that are
yeah,
actually
yeah,
life-threatening. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting to see all the vinegar safety stations set up in many of these areas. And um, I mean, and the locals know about it. Sometimes the tourists don't. They just go in the water, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they think, oh, it's a beach. Let's go in the water.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So I don't know about you, but I mean, not that I want to see spiders or snakes so
yeah.
much, but I just always think of Australia. Of course, I guess I'm thinking the outback. You just think, a lot of wild animals, just different, wildlife there. Were you disappointed that you didn't see any?
No, not at
No.
all. The only two animals that I was really wanting to see, of course, were the koalas and the kangaroos.
Hmm.
And I got to see them. I went to north of Brisbane is the Steve Irwin. Steve
Oh,
Irwin's the
yes, yes, yes.
the family's brought on Steve or I think it's called the Australian Zoo, but the son is now kind of taking it over, and he's taking Steve's spot and doing the shows. They have a crocodile shows, which I really don't care about the crocodiles. I didn't stick around for that, but I wanted to see the kangaroos and the koalas.
Yes.
Those are the two animals that I relate to Australia. So I did go to see them, and a lot of other different animals as well, creatures. They had the spiders, they had the snakes in those little boxes. I
Yeah.
could care less. I didn't really want to, I'd see. I did go to like the Queensland Museum in
Okay.
Brisbane. Whenever I go to these city centers, these places are usually free to go through if you want to take a break from the heat. In Sydney, I also did the museums, and they have in the Queensland Museum, they had all the species of snakes and birds and spiders kind of on display, like dead. But they have this
Oh,
is what
God.
you can find. This is
Yeah.
what you can find in these are our state. This is local kind of
Yeah.
native animals. So that was kind of neat to see. I didn't want to see them in real life, but the kangaroos and the koalas, I seen them in the zoo, and then which I'm not keen on seeing animals in zoos, but if I was to see a koala, that's where I had to go. But I was actually really fortunate to see a koala in the wild. I was
Oh,
on Magnetic Island, actually, would be another gem. It's off
okay.
you take a ferry from Townsville, which is kind of a big city, not big like Brisbane, but another big city. And you take a ferry over to Magnetic Island, and it's actually, they have some nice hiking trails that I did. They have a bus that goes around the island, takes you from one point to the other. And that would be probably a spot that I might suggest to people to go visit.
Okay.
Um, because you have to take a ferry, it's kind of
Off the beaten
off the
path.
beaten path.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that.
but that was one that I could get to by public transportation.
Mhm.
And I knew they had public transportation on the island. So I did a
Okay.
hike. There was actually a World War II um, army barracks from which I didn't really know about the World War II. The Japanese had actually attacked Australia quite a bit in that war. When all of
Okay.
the men were off fighting in Europe, it was the women and the older people that were kind of protecting the land. It was kind of interesting, and there was an old kind of ammunition spot. It was because it was up on this higher mountain, and they would look for the Japanese warships, and they were
Um,
actually. So I didn't really know that history
yeah.
of. the Japanese attacking Australia, like
Right.
because they were all their army was gone away, and they were kind of vulnerable. So that was kind of you could tour, you could walk around the ruins of that and see some of the lookouts that they would spot, and the history of the women actually were the spotters. A lot of them were the spotters,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was kind of so that was Magnetic Island, and that and on my hike there was a koala up in a tree, and people on the other hike, they're really hard to find because they sleep a lot, and it's
Yeah.
true. They're not that big. There's the size of a cat, and they're curled up, always sleeping. So somebody on the hiking trail had told me there's a koala up in the tree. Somebody had drawn an arrow in the sand on the walking path to look for that arrow and look up. And so, yes, I did see a koala in
Oh,
the wild,
that's so
and
cool.
that was really cool. It was up maybe about 10 feet or maybe 20 feet. Couldn't really,
Okay.
of course, you're not supposed to touch them anyway.
Mm-mm.
And then as for the kangaroos, I hadn't seen any all the way through New South Wales. I went to go see them at the zoo. I had done a house sit in Bribie Island, which is just north of Brisbane,
Okay.
in January. And on this island, and kind of where I was house sitting, there was kangaroos everywhere on the front yard. I'd
Oh,
walk
how
the
fun.
dog, and families of kangaroos just hanging out at the park, and the little joeys in the pocket, and it was the funnest thing. They obviously knew I was a tourist because I had my phone out all the time, but they they were quite calm, and like
Okay.
squirrels are to us in North America, or
Yeah.
deer on the West Coast. They're just kind of on the lawns, and they eat the lawns, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, a bit of a nuisance. I hear about, it's like, oh, there's a kangaroo. And I hear about the nuisance from the locals saying, oh, they poop and they eat my plants. And,
This
but
is
to me, it's like, oh, that's it's cool. You got kangaroos in your front yard. But,
it's
to them,
like you
it's,
said, it's kind of like deer in North
yeah,
America, in
yeah,
front.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
like,
grew
oh,
up with deer in our yard all the time. Yeah.
yeah. So
Oh,
it's a
that's
novelty.
awesome. Well, it is for us, right? Because
Yeah, it is.
it's not an animal that we see, so it's just I would love to see them too. So that would be
Yeah,
my, if I go to Australia, that's like I'm gonna look for
yeah,
opportunities to
it's a
possibly
must.
see them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Ah, well, you've mentioned so many good places, recommendations. As far as staying places, I know you do house sits a lot. You mentioned the whole camper van kind of renting thing is big there. And then you did some Airbnbs. Are there any other, I'll say, budget ways to stay in Australia? Because we know, like you said, it is a little more expensive to
Yeah.
stay than, say, I know you went to Indonesia, right? That would be, like night and day as far as what you're
Yeah.
paying for accommodations, right? So,
It was Indonesia was about a third the price. This is a Western country, so
right.
accommodation for and because I'm doing a slow travel, long travel, my goal was I was spending 90 days here. I wanted half of that time to be house sitting. And I was able to, my first 3 months, I was able to get 30 days house sitting. So that helped my cost. And then the other places I stayed was hostels. And
Okay,
there's some
hostels.
yeah,
Yes.
really great hostels. I was in New South Wales, and then when I went up to Queensland, I used bookings.com and hostel
Hostel
world,
World.
I guess.
Yeah.
But mostly I use bookings because they're on both platforms, and I get
Hmm.
Genius points. So, and I like to keep my bookings in one
One
spot.
spot. Yeah.
So, but the hostels here, I would definitely say Asia has nicer hostels
Oh,
than
okay.
Australia. Here, and just the way I say that is the hostels, you're in a dorm, you're in a bunk bed. A lot of times there was no curtains I would make a curtain because I got clips and I put my sarong up. I like to have a little bit of privacy. You could, it was actually like a bunk bed, like for, rickety kind of, the
Ah,
metal bunk bed for the most part. And
yeah.
hostels weren't cheap. Like I like the hostels for several different reasons for my budget.
Hmm.
Um, because I am, trying to stay in Australia for, pay for a month and a half accommodations. If I'm spending $200 a night in an Airbnb or hostel, which is kind of, or a hotel, that's kind of an average rate or more for a
Okay.
hotel. paying $50 to $60 a night was kind of more in my budget. So that's
Yes.
about what I was spending.
Okay.
That's an Australian price, which is
Okay.
similar to a Canadian price, would be probably about maybe 35 US, maybe. Um, so I looked for them because they had the kitchens. I could save money, get
Hmm.
groceries, and just there's usually a pool. I would look for a place with a pool in the summertime when I was here. It was nice to dip, jump
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
pool, and aircon in the rooms.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Especially in the summer.
yeah, it did get kind of hot. And I had no problems. I would stay at a hostel for like 5 days. You kind of get to know the area pretty good, sometimes a week. And if I didn't like, there was one up in Harvey Bay. I was really, I wasn't really liking the hostel. So I just booked a hotel and
Okay.
got a decent sleep in the hotel. So that's always my option, my backfall on that.
Yeah.
Like, and then I spent, $150 in that hotel, but I had a decent night's sleep and I had some privacy, and I was reset.
Sometimes
So
that's, yeah, you need that every once in a while, right? Just like you said,
yeah,
kind of like reset.
yeah, and the way I see it is I'd rather spend my budget in my daytime activities than how at least I sleep. I usually sleep with listening to music or falling asleep to podcast or something. I do have a sleep mask if I needed, but most of
Hmm.
the time I'm pretty tired by the time I get in there. And I look for female rooms, like four
Yes.
bedrooms, its
Yeah.
own ensuite. And those there's lots of hostels around, and they're pretty easily to get to from the bus routes. Like the bus, a lot of people on these Greyhound. I took the Greyhound bus pass, which I bought a unlimited 30-day bus pass, so I could hop
Mm.
on, hop off, kind of on this bus, and so I could get off as many times as I want over 30 days, and that saved me quite a bit. I think that bus pass cost $400 Australian, and I got 3 nights accommodations in Cairns for free at a hostel at kind of a party hostel, but
Oh, because of the pass that you bought that came with
yeah,
it? Oh,
it was a special they ran when I bought the
okay.
pass, and so that kind of allowed me to take 30 days to take my time to go through
Hmm.
Queensland time and stop at these. I went to Townsville, and I went to Magnetic Island,
Now,
and I
yeah.
went to Harvey Bay, and I went to Airlie and Mission Beach. That was another spot that I'd seen on the list. It was really, really raining when I was there, so
Mm.
I really didn't do much. Some of the people, and I hear a lot of the activities with the other kids, because I'm on the hostels and the buses with a lot of younger people,
I was gonna
and they're
say, call them kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're my kids' age, but I mean,
Yeah.
they really did connect with me, and they were kind of interested in my story, right? Which
Yeah.
is kind of they want to tell their parents about me, maybe
Yeah.
for them to do it.
Like,
Um,
why can't they have a cool parent like you, right?
yeah, they would be doing skydiving, and they're doing all of the excursions that I am not doing because of my budget. So I'm not sure what their budget is, but they're probably not traveling for 6
Yeah.
months in Australia as well, and they're not house sitting. And
Mm.
the house sitting really worked out well. I came back to Australia my second time. I was supposed to be sailing in out of Airlie Beach. That kind of fell through. So I had already booked my flight back to Canada, so I was staying in Australia till the end of June. So I had to quickly kind of pivot and
Yeah.
change my plans, and I was able to land a house sit in Brisbane for a month. So I just came off of my month house sit in Brisbane with a puppy, a beautiful home close to
Yeah.
the bus station. I met tons of ladies, got into the music scene, and started pickleball and
Uh,
joined a dance exercise class. And I walked all these different areas to see these old historic hotels or taverns from the history. And I really kind of gravitate to what was happening, what built up Australia. Well, the mining is huge here. The
mm.
mining always has been, and that's how they brought a lot of their money to the country. So there's a lot of history in that, and they've really maintained that history in Queensland and all through Australia. But you go into these old hotels that are now taverns, bars, and they have like their pokies, and they have the bar, the food, and there's these different areas. There's a big culture for sports here, for the
Okay.
rugby and the
Rugby.
footy.
Yeah.
Um, And so it really, you could do anything you want if you're into arts. And there's Brisbane especially has like an art scene, arts area. There's entertainment area. There's a sports area. There's this
Mm-hmm.
downtown CBD Central Business District. You'll hear that.
Okay.
They shorten all the words
I
here
was
in
gonna
Australia.
say CBD.
Yeah, not the CBD that we know in North America. It's so they shorten all of the words. I'm learning the lingo now. Even on the news, they shorten the words. So it's like
Really? Oh,
it's the national language when they shorten some of these words, and
oh wow.
it's kind of fun to. I I've spent time here, but I'm not talking like them yet. But
But it sounds
I
like
definitely
you've gotten yourself really ingrained though. You said you're involved with some of those local activities like dancing,
yeah
pickleball,
yeah yeah
those ladies that you've met up with, the music scene. I mean, that's part of the beauty of what you're doing is kind of slow travel and really,
yeah.
getting to see a whole area for what it's worth and not just the highlights, or what we see on Instagram, right? So
Right. And we think, Australia being a Western country, and I'm from Canada, you're from the States. We're all we're Western countries,
hmm
but it's still Western country. Yes, they all speak English with their own dialect, but it's still a bit different. It's a no tipping society here too, which is, you know,
Okay.
where we come from. Tipping is expected even when you just order a coffee anymore,
I
and
know.
so that is I noticed this the cost savings on that too. If you
hmm
go to a restaurant and it's $10 for a dish or a burger, say, you're only paying $10 for that burger, no added. In Canada, we're heavily taxed on everything. So that burger would have cost me probably $14 in Canada, but here it's $10. It's $10, no tax, no
The
tipping.
tipping.
You pay, you order at the bar, at the counter, your
Okay.
meal and your drink, and you sit down and they bring it to you, or you use the QR codes at the table. So it's actually really convenient. As a solo
hmm
traveler, I don't have to, you know, flag somebody down. I can
Yeah.
just sit, do
Yeah.
everything from the table.
That's nice.
So I really like that feature. Though
hmm
on the other aspect of that, when you if I would go into a bar or a restaurant in my other travels in UK, even, I would eat my meal at the bar top. At least I could talk to the
Talk to,
bartender
yeah.
or somebody
Yeah.
make a conversation.
Right.
This, you're kind of sitting at a table. You're obviously not going to join a table of six people. You're sitting at a table by yourself, and
Yeah.
it can be a bit isolating. And you're looking
Okay.
around at other people. So it's hard to break the ice on that. So
hmm
I did have to make an effort with the meetup groups too, and then it just kind of flowed, right? They're like anything you need, and staying in contact using your networks, and keep, wish them happy birthday, merry Christmas. It takes nothing with our, to do that, keep those connections going. And some of them want to meet me out traveling. They're like, well,
Yeah.
because they're travelers themselves, so they've showed me their country or their
Yeah.
state or their
hmm
their region,
Region.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and they want to, like, if they come to Canada, I may or may not be there, but I can tell them about places. So
Right.
it, it's kind of good, so definitely I'm going to come back to. I've been, some of my house sits, they want to have me back to
See,
sit
that's
for them again,
great.
or
Yeah.
just to come visit, become my friend. So
Yes.
I definitely will come back to Queensland,
hmm
'cause I just love the diversity of, go
Yes.
to the beach, or you can go to the beach, or you can go into the countryside where they have like the farm stands and the Barbies and the waterfalls. It's all really close within each other. Like, I would stay away from next time I would stay away from summertime, because I was here in the summer, right in the middle of summer.
Oh,
So
it's
it's quite
hot.
hot and
Yeah.
rainy, cyclone
Okay.
season. And I didn't get caught up in any cyclones, but there was two big ones that happened in Queensland when I was here. One was quite damaging to north of Cairns. So I would, probably, I'm here in the autumn. I really like this season, though a little bit warmer Queensland, because I'm in New South Wales now. I like to have, about 25 degrees Celsius and up. And that's, and
Okay.
right now, North Queensland, it is still that temperature. But
Okay.
again, a lot of people travel there. Australians will travel there for their winter. So it
Okay.
can be busier. I was there actually in the off season. Summer is off season because they don't because
Well,
it's
it's
so hot.
so hot. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Well, where are you off to next, Miss Julie? I think you're
Uh,
kind of finishing up, right?
yeah,
And
I'm
then,
heading back to Canada the end of June. On my way back, I'm stopping in Hawaii for a week. It was
okay.
a logical layover that they were going to do a 16-hour layover, something crazy. So I'm like, I'll stay for the week.
Yeah,
And
right.
because I'm
You
not
might as
really on a
well.
timeline. Yeah. And then I'll spend, my summers in Canada, and I'm doing my dad's there, my kids are there visiting, reconnecting
Yeah.
with them. I'm going to do some traveling around Canada, do some music festivals I volunteered at, which is, kind of fun in
Oh,
British
that's a great
Columbia.
way to see them, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you get in free to the
Yeah.
music festival if you volunteer, and
Yeah.
you can't I'll camp. So that's what I'm looking, and I have some house sits lined up as well. Um, some of my repeat clients from last year who travel every year at the same time, and it's one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite ones to do that. And then I think next is Latin America, which is a
Okay.
big task to take on. So I'm gonna get do some preparing for that, do some research. Takes a long time to get
Yeah.
to have a stress free. Of course, that won't be house sitting. That will be hostels or homestays,
Okay.
and to see where I wander off to down there.
You gonna start like in Central America and work your way down to South
Yeah,
America? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I'm looking another way to kind of explore. There's car delivery services that a lot of Canadians winter down in California, Arizona, or even into Mexico. So some of these car delivery services, the people don't want to do the drive.
Yep.
I'm looking at taking one of the cars down for them. So I'll do the drive through the States, which is beautiful to go explore that
Yeah.
side of North
I'm
America as
I'm
well.
laughing because my parents did that. My dad did that because they go to Florida every year, but they're really too old to be driving from Pennsylvania to
Yeah.
Florida. And so this is the first year that they hired a car service. Two previous years they used the train and had the train bring their car down.
Okay.
And I was kind of upset. I was like, why didn't you ask your daughter? Like I would have driven it. I don't know, but anyway, so
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that service. So yeah, it's a great way to get from one place to the other. And then it sounds like from there, once you get yourself, I guess, Mexico, wherever, maybe
Yeah.
you'll
Go into Mexico. There's a couple of other areas that I would like to go visit in Mexico. Um, I also want to keep an eye on the weather. I don't want to be in South America when it's rainy season. So
yeah.
stay. That's one thing I have been learning about hovering around the equator, which is kind of what I do. It's like you don't want to be on one side. Can ruin. When I went into Indonesia this time, it was March and April, and that was pretty much full on rainy season. So I had a lot. I mean, it was very warm rain. But it
Yeah.
kind of had on some of your activities you want to do. I scooter around quite a bit,
Hmm.
so I was in a poncho, living in a poncho, pretty much. Um, so, I mean, it didn't ruin my time in Indonesia. I did beautiful
Sure.
exploring. I did Komodo Islands again. I went diving, and I drove a scooter around Flores Island, which is that is definitely a hidden gem for Indonesia. But I found another favorite spot back in Bali, away from major touristy areas
Hmm.
that I like to go back to, and as Ahmed, and I like to be with expats. I like to be with the locals and have some expats there,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm learning about. What I'm looking for is my community is have a little bit of both, but
Yeah.
close to the water, but also close to the mountains where you can get a break from
Hmm.
any heat, or if there's storms, kind of get hidden
Yeah.
away. I mean, these areas do get a lot of storms compared to what I have in Canada. So
Yes. Right. Well, I'll be anxious to hear about your plans for Latin America and timing and all that stuff. And, let's keep connected, of course. But
yeah, for
you
sure.
also have, I noticed you've been posting a lot more about your journey. And so I just want you to mention, is it okay, people follow you? I think it's Instagram, right? That you're posting a lot of this journey that you're on right now. Just remind
Yeah,
them where they can find you.
On Instagram, it's Julie's Journey 70. And I try to keep posting. I'm doing some TikToks as well, but mostly I focus on Instagram. It has a few more tools that I can use to make it fun and quick and get the information out.
Yeah.
I just post my regular kind of daily life. I think sometimes it's kind of boring, but yesterday I took the dog to the beach, and here I am having to learn a new dog. I have a new
Yeah.
dog that he's an older dog. How is he managing with other dogs? So I have to learn. It's all kind of a learning every day. If you don't learn, then you're not progressing. So
Absolutely.
so that's on Instagram and on Facebook as well, Julie's Journey. And
Okay.
that was my two platforms that I kind of focus on. It does take a lot of work to keep
I
up
hear you.
social daily posts and to keep it fun. I like to, I'm learning. I learned a lot about Instagram in the last 2 years, because I do have a lot of younger people following on Instagram and people more my age or more on Facebook,
Hmm.
but they're kind of moving over to the other
Yeah.
side,
Yeah, they are.
and TikTok is kind of not as big as platform. There's been a lot of controversy over TikTok, but so Instagram is mostly where
Yeah.
I post. Though Facebook, I can do more paragraphs and word and type things out
Right.
that I
Right.
do like. So, but
Yeah.
both information's on both of those pages. So,
Okay.
yes,
I'll make sure I include that in the notes so if anybody wants to follow you. And let's definitely plan to reconnect in, I don't know, several months again, maybe the
yeah,
end of the year
yeah,
or so, when you have maybe started your Latin American journey. I'll be curious to hear
that
about it.
sounds
Yeah.
great, Cheryl.
I
Yeah,
love it,
thank
Julie.
you
It's so
for
fun to
having.
connect. And I want us to someday meet in person. So,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well,
yes.
maybe I'll be driving a car through Houston.
Let me know. Yes, if you when you're coming through the States, let me know. I'd be willing to
Yeah.
drive and meet you. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
good. Sounds like a
Never
plan.
know. It's always like open. I've learned to be less scheduled.
Yeah.
Um, I used to be a very scheduled person. Now I just kind of let the way I can pivot very easily now. It's a lot easier for me to make those pivots when I feel it's necessary or my gut
Hmm.
instinct telling me so. Um,
Yes,
and I'm
absolutely.
always up for meeting people who I've met this way and meet in real person in real life. So it's always makes it more.
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
excited for that potential meeting for sure. So,
Yeah.
yes. Well, thank you again, Julie, for your time. I loved
Okay.
it. And you had such great recommendations. And I'm going to try to take some notes on that too, so that if people are looking for, kind of different things to do in the Queensland state. So thank you again so much for all that valuable information, that firsthand information. So,
Yeah. I'll send you the apps that I was using and put
okay,
them on the page because they were
that
quite
would be
helpful. Yeah.
perfect. Yes, absolutely. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks, Cheryl.
All right. Hey, sister travelers, did this podcast inspire and encourage you or move you to get out there and travel? Wonderful. There are 3 ways you can thank me. First one is leave a written review for the show on Apple Podcast. 2, share the show with your sister travelers, your friends, your family. And 3, subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. And thank you again for listening to the show. Sisters, be fearless, take the leap, and get out there and have an adventure.